Hey everybody, welcome to Good Question. This is a show where we answer questions and hope some good comes out of it. What do you think?
It's good.
I just thought of that one as like the countdown was going to 0. Consider this like a focus group testing. Welcome everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm Curtis Childs. We have here, everyone want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Cara Dom, line consultant for the New Century Edition.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, Chris Dunn, community manager.
And I'm Chelsea Odner. So don't you all know me by my first name now?
Yeah.
It's Chelsea. And yes,
yeah.
You know who I am.
We do, and you all do because it's written here, but we needed to have that connection here because you, the audience, and us, the people on camera, are going to be interacting this entire time in multiple ways. The very first way is that any of you at any time, for no reason, can like and subscribe what we're doing here. And if you subscribe, there's 2 new features we're debuting today in this show. If you subscribe, you will see your name pop up there. The last person literally to subscribe was named Money Money. If one of you who are watching who haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. You'll pop up right there. And if you are digging this and want to extend our session, we are introducing a feature today here where if anybody donates to Off the Left Eye, see the link in the description. You'll see that thermometer go up. If we hit $100 from everybody combined, we'll do an extra 15 minutes of Q&A. The only real question is, what if we don't hit that? Will it be awkward or not? I don't think it will, but it'll be fun if we do hit it. Your donation goes to making this possible. This is a non-profit venture, so it depends on people contributing. Okay, so you'll also see your name pop up over there. So thanks in advance, and let's now get to the questions. By the way, if you don't know, down here you can see the chat that's going on. That's where we pull these questions out of. So be in there, be a part of it, ask a question here. So first question is, MTP358, will crime victims who are denied justice in this life get any justice in the afterlife?
Oh.
Wow.
So this is isn't this one of the primary arguments people say when how can there be a loving God over everything? Because life is not fair. And I know that it gets me all riled up when I feel like, look, I read some news story that I think I have a sense of who was there and what was happening to them, and I feel like this was not fair. This person was treated in this way. Life is not fair. So is there justice, and what would that look like in the life after death?
That was my first question. How does MTP define a victim getting justice?
Well, we got to define it. What do you think?
Okay. Well, I have to get out what I think he thinks or
Yes.
she.
Okay. Yeah. What is
that's
MTP, male or female? Right.
I'm thinking that, as with everybody in the afterlife, they're going to get a fair shake, and life is going to be just what it needs to be for that person. I don't know about whether that the victim will have a chance to confront the what's it called? Perpetrator.
Yeah.
It comes back to, I guess, what we always talk about is that people get together in the other life if there's some use to be served by their getting together. Those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, that sets the tone. What do you guys think?
Yeah, in our most recent season, so it might have been I'm trying to think. Maybe you'll remember which one, but we have an animation in one of our recent shows about, and it might be one that has yet to come out, about Swedenborg describing 2 different accounts of people who were murdered being brought together with the person who murdered them. And in the case, it's the murderer who has the hardest time, with the encounter, because it brings up, they're having to really confront what happened. And then Swedenborg sort of describes the victims, having, in these cases, there's just so many cases, but in these cases it was like, that people he describes them feeling sort of a sense of peace and not having any,
Vengeance?
Really, even, but that even just bringing it together was enough to sort of cause a spiritual work to happen for the people who had committed the murder.
Yes.
So.
It's definitely one of those episodes.
Which one?
I was going to say, it's the one we already put out, but it might actually be the one that's about to come out.
Yeah, Will Life Be Different When You Die? That might be
I think that's the one, although it just feels like yeah, this is already out, but it's because we've been
Yep.
lovingly looking over it and
Yep.
remaking it. But it's true that that's very relevant to this. And Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
My major thought as far as justice goes is that I think absolutely, but it's not from God. It's from the perpetrator. I mean, the perpetrator, if that person was ultimately an evil kind of person or a selfish person or someone who delighted in causing pain and creating victims, then they'll have to face that. And they'll be attracted to other people who are like them and have to exist in a society in hell that kind of that thing happens to them and they can extract that on others. So but it's not the Lord who's going to be punishing them. It's kind of the evil in and of itself that they embody.
That's right. And like Swedenborg describes how evil carries its own punishment. And so even again in this situation, it's attached to the person who perpetrated it, and the crime victims, they may, that would be their own spiritual process of like how to make peace with what happened, but it might not necessarily be, like that the crime victim necessarily has to approach or have some connection with whoever perpetrated the crime to know that is getting dealt with or something.
Yeah. It's interesting.
There he is. Hi, MTP 358.
Oh, robbery. Right.
He was referring to a robbery.
Yeah. So okay.
Thank you.
Well, no, that's going to ruin my response.
Oh,
I'm just
sorry.
kidding. One thing that's interesting is it seems like when people go to the other life, their perspective on what is important and what they need changes. I mean, and our perspective, if we think about is life fair or not fair, taking into account if it really is an eternal thing and there's the permanent happiness of heaven, changes what we feel like is fair or isn't fair. So you're absolutely right, Chelsea, that in those upcoming shows, the people who have had crimes committed against them are just very barely interested even in the idea of the resolution of the situation, because they, as one of the victims says, which is an amazing statement, he says, well, it was providence and maybe I would have gone on to do something terrible in life or something, which is, you only hear that attitude. He was just totally not shaken, but the person who had committed it, as Chris was alluding to, is really worked up about it and can't get away from this evil that kind of carries its own punishment. We did a show way back in the day called What Happens with Unsolved Crimes in the Afterlife.
Oh, yeah.
This is super early. Don't go watch it. Probably the clothes and the hair are no good. Way back millions of decades ago. But I remember somebody commenting on that who didn't think we knew what we were talking about, and they're just like, oh, they're just making stuff up, unsolved crimes. This is something people would wonder about. We have proof positive of it right here, that if you're adding not just that there's another stage to existence, but that existence is good, there's got to be some kind of resolution. But yeah, it doesn't mean that,
right.
You as a victim of a crime then have to go and confront the person and make sure. It sounds like everybody's well taken care of throughout the process. And so when the robbery happened that MTP is talking about, in the moment, somebody lost something, somebody felt like they gained something, but what was really going on there? What are the lasting effects? In the next life, the people involved in that, it could be the person who stole, that evil or that lack of goodness is attached to them and they've actually lost something through it. And hopefully they have a sense of, I've got to try to cast this off, but they're going to have to do work. And maybe the person who had that happen to them suffered for a while on earth, but it brought some kind of spiritual quality where it's not as unfair as it seems. So
yeah,
that's
nice.
Great. Hey,
we could go on and on about this one, I feel like, but
Tacitus subscribed. Thank you so much.
Yay, Tacitus.
Hey, Jonathan Childs
Jonathan
gave us a
Childs.
donation. Thanks so much. And if you're worried that we might go an extra 15 minutes, there's nothing you can do to stop it. Because you can't. We should introduce a feature where you can donate to bring the thermometer back down. And if it goes to negative 45, we stop at half an hour.
Yeah,
okay,
we
let's
stop
do
early.
the next question. This one is going to be from,
dun, dun, dun.
drum roll please, not MTP. There we go, Matthew Bush. Is doing something good because you want to go to heaven a bad thing, or can it be? So if heaven is a state of mind that is, what I really love is usefulness, and myself is no longer the idol that sits over all of life. How do you get around this? So I learned that there's heaven, but I got to not think about heaven. Well, how do you sort out this kind of motives when we're dealing with something like we're supposed to try to be better, but can you have this be a legit rung on the ladder to grab?
Yeah, I
Chelsea,
do think there's like one way Swedenborg describes it. He relates it to a story in the Bible about Jacob being with his father-in-law Laban for a long time. And in that story, I'm blanking on the details, but the takeaway is the fact that there's something that Swedenborg calls mediate goods. I don't know what how you'd translate that now in the NC, or if it's still
intermediary or something.
Intermediary.
Just sort of something in the middle to make a bridge, kind of.
Basically, like that it's essential for us to do good things because we want a reward for it in order for us to grow spiritually, because we just can't not to get to the point where we actually start to want the good thing just because it's good. So like that's an essential phase that we go through, because otherwise, like, because we're just inevitably going to have, selfish aims like, oh, there's heaven, I want to go to heaven, so I'm going to do these good things. So in that case, it's not a bad thing, because it just is like an essential phase that you go through. And so we can and especially when you're like in the adolescence of your spiritual life or something, like awkward growth spurts where part of you knows that you're doing it just because you're going to get something good out of it, but that's actually helping to pull this other part of you along that really would resist otherwise even giving you the time of day to do something like that. So that's part of that, but I guess it could be a bad thing. I don't know.
No, I like it.
Does it become that?
Well, in newsflash in the meantime, Tacitus says that he unsubscribed and then resubscribed, so that does work. Anyone who wants to do that, you can do
Good
that.
work.
Hack the system.
So you have to play the system.
But we appreciate it. We appreciate it very much. We're sorry we lost you there for a second. Was it something we said? What you were talking about, Chelsea, reminds me of the manna and the quail. That when the children of Israel, this is a correspondence to the biblical story, children of Israel are going through the wilderness, and there's manna in the morning and quail in the evening, right? And that corresponds to, as I remember it, as I can misremember it right now, the manna,
more detail than I got out of the Jacob and Laban. That had like nothing to go on there.
The manna in the morning is like when the morning state is heaven, like when we are really in a heavenly sort of state. Then we can live off these really pure, great motives. But in the evening state, which is when we're more in our outer natural self, they had to have the quail. And so I think of, there's times when I want to be good because I can understand what it means to anybody that I'm interacting with. But to think that I'm going to go from being me today to wanting what's only good for non-selfish reasons all the time, no way. No way. There's going to be times when I need some kind of motive. And there's a story that Swedenborg tells about a group of people who had been cruel to people that they lived with. And they are shown, like, look, when people get along, look how nice the houses are that they get to have and all this sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, okay. And that was actually the first step in their journey. And they ended up getting good. So I certainly seem to see evidence in Swedenborg of the immediate good, which I'm glad I've got to start a band called Immediate Good.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that the quail thing, because when I was doing that part of the translation of Seekers of Heaven, I was blown away by how merciful that was and how human, like accommodating to the way human beings are. It's a very powerful section. If you want to go dig through Seekers of Heaven and find that.
Find her handiwork.
The part about the quails, it is powerful. That's and so also, cool. My other thought is that when you do something good, you get a little taste of heaven. So you're getting yourself there in the moment. You're getting yourself in that heavenly mindset in the very action of doing something good. So that seems like it's going to counterbalance whatever cloudy motivations you might have or something like that. Or it's part of the magnet. Like once you do something good, the magnetism of goodness and heavenliness pulls you a little farther forward, something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And it evolves with what I know it should be Chris's turn, but I just have the best thing to say in the world. It evolves with your picture of what heaven is, right? I think that initially it can seem like, okay, well, heaven is just, happiness for myself, having nice things, and so I can. But as you more understand viscerally what the experience of heaven is, then the motives can grow alongside it. I feel like it's very much set up to be this gradual stepping stone process.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Matthew, I totally appreciate this question, because from someone who has just 5 years into Swedenborg, I know that there is such a remarkable image of heaven that's portrayed. It's something that's super detailed, and it shines in this like level of beauty and depth. I think a lot of other sacred texts, at least that I've encountered, have not gone into that level of detail. And what you find is just like this amazing framework for living. So why wouldn't you want that? You know, it just seems like this really big draw. And when I've encountered that kind of thought myself, I think, what does heaven stand for? And how do I align my intentions with what that is? You know, like what does that mean for usefulness? Like, what does it mean for having the right motivations and then letting your behavior follow that? So if you want to be into heaven, just think about what that means and start to embody those things.
That's great. I do want to end it on the note that I feel like there's a couple of places where I found in Swedenborg where he seems to be a little bit lax about us sort of trying to get a magnifying glass over our motivations. That it's very tough to know exactly what we're coming from and everything, and you can endlessly second guess yourself. You know, if in general there's the guiding light that we should try to be better. He even says that we don't really know exactly why we do something, so we don't. That sort of relieves me of the stress of like, is this for just the right reasons? Doing something good because you want to go to heaven is way better than doing something bad because you don't care. So we're already you know, if I can get one of those,
Well, there's so many other bad reasons to do something good than to want to go to heaven.
Totally.
But
Swedenborg even says at times that you have to think about your eternal life when you're acting. That is actually a spiritual thing. So
like a useful framework to think about. Yeah.
So in conclusion, it's good.
If you're doing anything, you're giving God something to work with.
That's right.
You know.
That's absolutely right. Cool. All right. Thanks, Matthew Bush. Hey, we're a quarter of the way through our show, and we're a quarter of the way up our thermometer, so it's like nobody knows right now. And if you're just joining us and you're not subscribed, I guess like probably a lot of people tuning into this show are subscribed already, but if you're not subscribed, subscribe, and you can unseat Tacitus, although we would be happy to have him there for the whole show. Let's take a look at our next question. Jay Norris. Hey, Jay, what did Swedenborg say about people who believe in Jesus but also have others they pray to? Native Americans have spirits who help them. Person was being hateful to my wife about this. Thanks. Okay, let's see if we can't make some progress, because on this idea that can make people hateful. You definitely hear of people who are trying to say, look, there's only one way, and they're sure about it, and it can cause problems. So what about people who believe in Jesus but also have others that they pray to? Is that ever mentioned specifically?
I was going to say, what does Swedenborg say about
it? I have a starting point for us.
Another thought too.
I don't know if I know of him talking about people who believe in Jesus and have others that they pray to. He definitely talks about people that he meets of all kinds of religions, some even on other planets, and there are people who are doing practices that even some spirits around Swedenborg say, wasn't that idolatry? This person has a little there's one particular story I'm thinking of. This person has a carved figurine, and they're doing some kind of prayers to it, and the spirits around Swedenborg are like, well, look at that, that's idolatry. And Swedenborg is able, through the perception of heaven, to see that the reverence that person is feeling when they use that statue is absolutely compatible with worshiping the Lord, and that actually that person is more in tune with that than a lot of the Christian leaders that Swedenborg knew. So there certainly is room to have, it seems like almost any spiritual tradition can have just a beautiful heart to it that is absolutely compatible with everything.
Or what Swedenborg would call like genuine worship, like the internal is rightly aligned, no matter what the external, form of it is. I guess something, Swedenborg is just so upfront that we're always communicating with spirits, or like having some sort of association with spirits, that like there's such an interesting, there have been some interesting discussions on our channel about the nature of prayer and praying for others, and does prayer do anything when you're and like intermediary prayer or whatever that practice is called.
That's what it is. Yep.
Okay. And that all seems good. Like it can all be for good. And so, yeah, I feel like that's probably fine.
Yeah. There you go. There's our stamp of approval on it. Yeah, and it's why are we doing it? And I would say, the way Swedenborg sees it, we don't receive anything good except for from the Lord, but you don't receive anything from the Lord except for through heaven and the spiritual world. I mean, there's some stuff that seems like it's direct, which is the ability to be rational and live, but all the goodness and truth came through God, through angels in heaven, through spirits who are with us. So the idea of having spirits who help, everybody's got spirits that help them, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And I think what brings it more and more into alignment with the way Swedenborg describes things is the more that you're interacting with those spirits, and the spirits themselves know, look, we're just, it's really all the Lord's goodness, which is what all good spirits are eager to say.
Right.
Not that they don't do a lot of cool stuff, but they're always saying, look, this is from the Lord. So that change is there. Like
angels, he says, are the spiritual beings that are able to be aware of us. They know that they're helping us, but they don't want to be acknowledged or given, have that credit or whatever for doing the work. They know they're just being servants, to the Lord and supporting us or whatever. And so it's like, but they are totally a support system that we have. So to pray for help, it's like, would you call up a friend if you're having a hard time? Like, yeah, you would. Like, I would. It's important to reach out to people. So it's like you're reaching out to your network, even if it's, having
the other side.
Calling on spiritual support.
Yeah. I was a Catholic before I found Swedenborg, and there's, with the Catholic system, there's saints and networks of saints that you pray to for certain reasons, and they're supposed to intercede your prayers. And when I came into contact with Swedenborg, he helped me to understand that dynamic a little bit better. And it really is like the power is in the Lord, and his love is desiring a constant relationship, direct relationship with us. And so it's not like you need intermediaries to connect with God, but it's good to have people that you can just talk to and pray to, that are there to, whose life models something that you want to live by. Or like when I was thinking about saints, it was people that just were good people that led lives that I wanted to try to emulate. And thinking about them in prayer, and knowing that the Lord's love is what I could still have a direct connection to, that was a helpful way to hold it.
Right. Yeah. It's the Lord. Right. The Lord is that life. Energy that is going on. And understanding that, yeah.
We did a show a long time ago called Angels After Terrorism, where we interviewed this couple, Conrad and Paula, who had lost their son in a terror attack in Nice, France. And they talked about all kinds of ways that their belief in the afterlife had helped them after that. And one thing is that, the Conrad was saying when he needed some help, he would ask his son, Nick, give me some help. And I didn't have a single fiber in my body, even as a total Swedenborgian, that was like, well, you shouldn't have asked Nick.
That's right.
Obviously, you love your child. He's there. It just seems like, of course, there's a connection there. And how better a way for the Lord to reach Conrad than through the love that Nick has for him. So
Right. Someone just asked me that a couple weeks ago. A new person to Swedenborg said, well, I guess you shouldn't pray to angels, right? And I said, heck, I do. And then I realized, praying to angels. But I definitely am invoking angels all the time, calling on angels. What's the difference? I'm just saying, help me out here. I'm in a tough spot. I need some help. Yeah. But that's not all that different from how I pray to God. So. But like you're talking about spiritual networks.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I saw somebody in the chat saying, wait, what do you mean subscribe? There's a little button. It's a YouTube subscription. And probably a lot of you already have it, but you click it, right below this video somewhere. And it just makes it so that whenever we release a new video, you know it. And if you are subscribed but you don't get notifications for our video, click that little subscription button, or maybe hover over it. There's a little bell below it. Click the bell. That means you'll get a notification every time we put something out. That's super, really good. Okay, thanks very much. Let's take a look at another question. Appreciate it, Jay. The next one is from Kendall M. Could all evil and falsity be defined as simply the reverse, perverted forms of goodness and truth? What is the origin of evil, falsity, if the Lord is love and wisdom?
Nice.
That's 2 questions, but they're both awesome.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think?
Big
Yeah,
ones.
how are we going to get the Lord's doing everything, and from whence evil, right, as it was famously put? And it just is weird. Evil is this weird thing when you start to follow it down into what it is and see it depicted. Like, what is the essence of this? What do you think? I feel like Swedenborg has some very cool, relevant commentary on this.
Totally.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he describes like the structure of heaven, and then there's a world of spirits in between and hell, and he describes like a perfect symmetry between them almost, that for every form of goodness and truth there's a corresponding hell that has evil and falsity within it. So there's an interesting parallel going on there. And he does even describe evil and falsity as just that, perverted forms of goodness and truth. That goodness is, if you think of it less of like 2 different substances, goodness and evil, it's like goodness is the real energy, and then when it gets twisted or used to selfish motives, then it becomes evil in its use. So that's how, so in terms of what's the origin, it's us receiving this life from the Lord, and then we're the turning point that decides how is it going to be used from us. And so if we use that in an evil direction, in a harmful way, then that becomes the origin of evil in that moment. But it's still love from the Lord that we've then twisted.
Yeah, awesome. Before we go to the next one, Jeremy Dowell in the John Childs has already got it. There's a link in the description below if you want to support the programming. Thanks for asking
We're
the
over
question.
halfway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we
Nice.
did it.
And
Thanks,
we have a
James.
good last donation.
Appreciate it.
I'll take the second one.
Yeah.
Just to throw in, I remember being fascinated by Swedenborg's reporting of like the earliest people and how they existed in like this remarkable partnership with the Lord, and they knew that their life was kind of like tied to the Lord's love and wisdom flowing into them, and successively over a long period of time, evil came about from the desire to distance oneself from God, to become independent from Him, maybe taking credit for things that happen to you, whereas that really belongs to like the Lord, who is the source of all good. So it's the desire to become distanced from God. Angels even go through that state at times, when we just talked about evening states and morning states, and angels feel to the degree that they're closer to God, or they're feeling associated with God, it's a morning state, and as they feel more distanced from God through maybe like small little bits of selfishness that pop up, it brings about a different kind of state. So,
yeah,
That's great.
Sorry, we don't usually do this, but I want to talk about, just for a second, that previous question, because the evening and morning states, there's always day and night. There's always day and night. So even I was saying before that, how can I, in my current state, always want to do things for just perfect motives, versus even angels, you get to the point, you have phases where you're doing things just exactly, it's very close to the reason God does them, but you're always going to have states where you need a little more self in it. Even angels, he talks about them doing good but having a little more self in it, that's their low point, though. That's the difference between them and us. So just saying, it's going to happen. There's not these Puritan expectations for us.
It's such a phenomenal, it's just like so interesting, because you have the Lord that Swedenborg describes as being like the human, or like selfhood, like with a capital S, like just the autonomous one, is like the Lord. But then the Lord wants to create these people that can receive the Lord's love, to be like a fulfillment of that desire to give all of that goodness that he has to others. And so, but our own little sense of self that needs to exist is the thing that then can make the choice to turn away, be like, I don't want to be led by this love. I want to be more and more my own driver of like what I want. But we have to come to the realization that we can't live of ourselves, and we don't live of ourselves. And so that's how we then can turn back towards the Lord and rectify the situation, come into alignment. And so it's just so interesting to think about. There's an episode on our channel called The Infinite in You, and that was sort of trying to encapsulate some of these ideas of this like fascinating dynamic between our little sense of self and the Lord and this relationship, and how evil then is sort of just this byproduct that happens.
Sure.
That's worth it, to God.
Right.
To be like, well, I know this is going to happen, but it's going to be good in the end.
Totally. Yeah. Clara.
I think you guys covered it.
Okay, then I'll end it by trying to say something as weird as possible. Thanks very much, Sean Smith. Appreciate it. We're all goodness and truth and all evil and falsity. Like rocks aren't doing good or evil. Streams aren't doing good or evil. This all comes out of people and specifically people's minds.
Yeah.
And Swedenborg says, don't click away, that your spirit, just like your brain, is organized matter. So it's organized spiritual matter. So just like you have certain neural connection-y things here, your spirit has these little forms that are either receptive of goodness and truth, and they're somehow there's some kind of shape that they can be oriented in a certain way.
And
he says that actually literally an impulse to do good you can find it in a shape in your brain's work.
Yes,
and
it turns things the other direction.
Evil and falsity is just like that funnel or whatever it is reversed.
Yeah.
Like if you looked at evil and falsity in a microscopic level or in a mind that leads to the acts, it's reversed. Somehow it's actually, or as we put in another
hardened
show,
or something like
spiraling the other way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That it actually is just, it's a system that reroutes goodness and truth into the opposite direction. So that is absolutely simply the reverse perverted form of goodness and truth. And as Chelsea was mentioning, there is a heavenly community that stands directly in opposition to every hellish community. And often, if we're talking about justice and fairness, often don't you find that people who have been harmed by some kind of evil really start to be part of the force to eradicate that evil from the world. That when people have been a victim of something, they're the ones who start making speeches and starting company and really understanding what it is that's evil about that thing.
Yeah, and that's something Swedenborg says is like one of the greatest, powers that the Lord has is to turn everything evil into some good. And that's not to say that calling what is evil good, because that's not what it is, but that it forces the evil to work toward goodness. And again, upping the weirdness bar. I'll take your weirdness and I'll raise you one. But
we got to have a weirdness bar on that side.
He describes witnessing these spirits on Jupiter.
You did it. Ding, ding, ding.
Presenting in representation, so like visual forms to his mind, the awesome way that the Lord takes something evil and turns it into something good. And he kind of describes it in this weird way, like you're describing sort of forms of the brain, but just like he can't even put detail to the representation that he's witnessing, but he says it was so amazing to see how simply and perfectly these spirits represented to him the way that the Lord turns evil into good. So it's happening.
Yeah. No, and there's two important things about that. First of all, thank you, Jeremy Dowell, for your donation. Much appreciated. And we're sitting here trying to quickly and off the cuff verbally describe these processes that are really complex and really elaborate. Like you're mentioning that to even something like, okay, we can express it verbally, God turns evil into good eventually. But what it actually is almost ineffable. He was being shown this spiritual mental image. So don't come here and say, well, that answer was a little bit not perfect enough, so I'm out. But use it as a stepping stone. And really the only way we get the satisfying answer is the concepts are in the mind, and then you get enlightenment about it, because that's heaven can kind of shine into that. So just keep covering ourselves here. Okay, we're halfway through. Let's take a little break.
What have we done?
And we've appreciated donations that come in. This is a little bit of a why that they matter to us, and how you supporting us keeps us going.
We want the ideas and insights we cover to be available for free to anyone, anytime they need them. As a nonprofit, we depend on donor support to continue to create high-quality programming. Any gift you give joins you to the central network of people in the world who make our work possible. You can deepen the significance of your gift by making it in memory or honor of someone special in your life. This could be done as a one-time gift, recurring monthly, or run as a special fundraiser for your circle of friends and family. Go to otle.causevox.com and follow the prompts to make a gift in whatever way is most meaningful for you. Your support helps the ideas in our content reach and nourish thousands of people every day around the globe. We couldn't do it without you. Give if you can, receive if you need. If we cycle through in this way, in the end, everybody wins.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. That was great. Thank you so much for your support. Hey, while we were in there, Gloria donated. Thanks so much, Gloria.
Wow, we're getting
everybody
very close.
really
So
appreciate it.
Oh, it looks like
Well,
we're
I was
there.
just saying, I'm really nervous. We might actually have to do 15 more minutes. We haven't prepared for those minutes. All right, let's take a look at what our
Lots of
next.
Still have questions.
Let's take a look at what our next question is. This is from Matt Klein. Hey, Matt, good to hear from you. Swedenborg talks about regeneration, but also mentions that aspects of ourselves that existing when we die continue as permanent parts of us that can never be changed. Mm-hmm. How do we grow and improve in heaven? What are we doing? We're going around saying like we're going to be reborn, and then there's also stuff in Swedenborg that is saying where the tree falls, it lies.
So it lies, right.
So which is it? Can we just decide that here, or is it maybe a little bit of both? What do you think, Cara?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like a lot of Swedenborg has a little bit of both.
That's what I love about it.
Yeah,
And
you
it's like,
can't sit too comfortably in any one answer.
that's right. And even like it's like the religiousness and yet the sort of openness of it, and there's the love but also the structure. There's just so many meeting places here. Go ahead.
After this, when we die, continues to permanent, that can never be changed. Well, it's not a very deep thought, but if heaven is eternal, what else is there to do but grow?
Yeah.
Like, as something static doesn't live that long.
Yes.
So, and Swedenborg talks about how we're continually getting closer and closer to God and refining our loves and all that kind of stuff. So I have to say, except the two-ness of it, I'm not quite sure how it is that parts of us stay and can never be changed. But also he talks about how when we die, a lot of things of this earth are just shed. Just like worldly concerns that we have to, because living in this world demands a lot of stuff that is no longer applicable in the spiritual world. He says a lot of stuff just gets shed when we die, so that we have our spirit itself to deal with. So I don't understand, Matt. Good question. Yeah. I just know he talks about two different approaches.
I do think there's something to like, two different ideas. One is like we are all each uniquely created beings, so we are meant to be, we're never not going to be ourselves, and yet we can continue to infinitely grow within who we are. Like the Lord can sort of foresee the infinite potential for growth, although I'm never not going to be Chelsea and have Chelsea that had the particular earth life that I'm having, which is beautifully suited for the Lord to infinitely, grow love and wisdom from based on whatever my, external life was like. And so something Swedenborg says, which is like anybody could say this, but that interesting that he's making this claim back in the 1700s, but that when you look more and more closely at something, it's not that it gets more and more simple, it gets more and more complex, or like more and more, there's the smaller the thing that the area that you're looking at is actually like the more infinite it becomes. And so there's something to that paradox happening with us, that there are permanent parts of us that never change, and yet that doesn't preclude the opportunity for infinite growth and development.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Good. Chris, do you have any further thoughts?
Well, I just remember being really kind of like awoken by reading that any evil that we do or any selfish thing doesn't disappear. It kind of like sticks with us. That was initially I was like, holy crap, I'm screwed. But what happens as you continue to read Swedenborg is that, if we're genuinely trying to be good people, those things, while they never go away, they acquiesce to, they just basically are quieted. And so in the afterlife, you might have those things as permanent parts of you, but they're dormant. and they might come out in little bits here and there, but the reality is it will not stop you from being the kind of person who you desire to be, if that's a good person or a bad person.
Yeah. Awesome. And thanks, Keith Curry. We met our goal, you guys. So
goal met.
We're in this for another 15 minutes, and suddenly everyone's like, what have we done?
One other thought along with Matt's thing was like, we need that balance, the whole idea of angels going through different states, but like it's what the balance between their being in their self and being more open to who they are in the Lord, that actually becomes this like, I keep going like this because I'm thinking of like a teeter-totter or something, like becomes this muscle, like this lever for movement, like going down a track or something like that. Right. Like you need that back and forth to happen in order to grow. So you can't, so those aspects of ourselves that can never change, like the evils we've done and the things that have happened to us, like that becomes this important balancing thing to help propel us in our spiritual life rather than, deter it or something.
Cool. Yeah. I want to throw a potential correspondence at it, because this is not something Swedenborg describes, but when he's big on microcosm, macrocosm, that large things can represent everything else that's smaller. And so think about planet Earth. And it's just kind of casual for us to hear, the reason why the Pennsylvania hills are like this is because they used to be an ocean 400 million years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's not an ocean now, but you can go and see fossils of what was there, and the limestone that was built up is now part of the soil and why certain trees grow there. So if we have stuff in us that at one time was alive and walking the earth, but let's say it gets made dormant, right? And it's never going away, but it's totally different. Now it's like some cave that's hollowed out and the new things are living in, right? It's something like that, right?
That's awesome.
It's
Wow.
something good,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
never
we're
thought about
the ecosystem. Well, I just like the idea of the progression of life on Earth is so enchanting, right? And so something like that's probably happening in us. The stuff that was living on us hundreds of millions of years ago, it's there, but it's actually providing
fossil records.
But it's not going to come out and get us, right? It's providing and actually the beautiful springs. I'm thinking of them happening in Florida, but they happen all over, where you just get this amazingly crystal clear water. Mm-hmm. That comes because there's all these limestone caves in there that were this life so long ago, and it's through that, I think it's limestone, through that aquifer, you got this amazing truth that couldn't be there without it. So it's got to be something cool like that.
Did you just think that up?
Yeah, yes, just now.
You gotta be kidding
awesome.
me.
That's pretty good. We should make a video about that. Shouldn't we? Okay, so thanks so much, Matt.
Earth correspondence video.
Oh, and thank you, Kendall. All right, we keep on marching
Kendall.
forward. Appreciate it, everyone. All right, let's do the next question. So this is Norman Van Etten.
Ooh.
Are angels and the Holy Spirit the same?
Ooh.
Well, I provide some useful service as host of explaining the question. I'm sort of feeling like my job has been replaced by machines. Are angels and the Holy Spirit, how does Swedenborg describe what those things are, as far as you guys know?
Well, I mean, I guess they're not the same.
Yeah.
But the Holy Spirit is in angels.
Yeah.
And in us too.
Yeah.
So
what is Holy Spirit? Do you guys,
The way I think of the Holy Spirit is God's effect in the world, like the outpouring of divine love and wisdom to everybody.
Yep.
And so angels receive that, as do all of us, because angels are just former people.
Right.
And the other thought I had about that is escaping me.
Well, the thought you just gave, you tossed it over my way, is just that, Swedenborg describes angels and humans as gems or like prisms, like being able to transmit light. And so that really is just a great analogy for what the Holy Spirit is, that you've got light coming in, but it needs this medium to move through. And it's still the light that's coming out on the other side, but now it's got some color to it or whatever.
And what I was thinking of was, there's a quote in Swedenborg somewhere that says, because God cannot pat Curtis on the back directly.
Nor would he want to, right?
He works through other people to do so. So in that way, we're all sort of vehicles of the Holy Spirit.
Of the Holy Spirit, yeah. For sure.
That's a great way to put it.
Yep.
Is divine proceeding, is that the Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one way that it's been said. So this is like the effect, this is God accomplishing things. So an angel, technically is a finite vessel that receives that Holy Spirit. But if we can't move a step without the power of heaven, and that it's really what's doing I mean, they're definitely ambassadors for it. Chris, do you have any further thoughts?
No, I mean, that's basically what I would say.
Yeah, and like the one sort of point that Swedenborg really underscores in his work True Christianity, especially where he talks about the Trinity, is just like there's just this essential part of us that is the pivot, like the choice to use the Holy Spirit that's flowing into us in whatever way we want to. And so like it's always we act of our own volition on behalf of the Lord. Like that's just essential. So it is the Holy Spirit, but it's not just the Holy Spirit moving straight through us, because that would override this essential part of us that is to have that sense of agency.
You did some awesome, or the sort of the driving force behind writing some awesome deep dive into like on its own initiative on behalf of...
That's the one.
What show was it?
Probably in How to Understand the Trinity.
Was that in the Understand
I think
the Trinity?
so, yeah.
Go check out that show. It's a classic. Okay, thanks so much, Norman. Let's take a look at another one. This one is from Daffodil. Hi, Daffodil. Will our loved ones who have already passed over know when we have died? Did you get a notification?
Yeah,
I think they do,
if they
right?
click the bell, then
Right.
Subscribe. All your family members are subscribed to your life.
Tacitus says, I would pat Curtis on the back after beating him at basketball.
Nice.
So he's probably referencing that. I think one time on the show,
I want tickets to that game.
I told this story of how I've never won a basketball game, an organized basketball game in my life, despite playing 3 seasons.
You told that on the air?
I hope I did. Did I? Oh, no. Okay. So, all right. So, do they know? And can we count on being surrounded by people who, or how do we go and put an ad out? Like, I've died if anyone knew me during life. So what do you guys think?
Yes. I think that, like, experience, now I sound like Swedenborg, like experience makes plain that
your transformation is
this
complete.
happens. Because I feel like for so many people who are nearing the end, they just seem surrounded, or often many times they can be looking around at people around them, or specifically are talking to people who have already passed on. And so I'm trying to think if Swedenborg says anything sort of technical, but it certainly just seems like, yep, there's that. We are met. I don't know if he says in the same place, like the why and that it happens, but I feel like in heaven and hell, he just says like, we are greeted by our loved ones when we wake up in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Big yes on my end. I mean, everything I read suggested that's totally the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said he describes reunions all the time. I've seen many people who are overjoyed to have arrived and friends overjoyed. How do those friends know? How are their friends there? Thought brings presence. Yes, thought brings presence, which means if you're thinking about them, they'll know you're there. I would say that's going to be locked down. Okay, thanks so much, Daffodil. Next one. This is from Laura Domek.
Nice.
Does becoming an angel run in families?
Such a great question.
Yeah. This is a good one to take into your next Thanksgiving dinner. It's all your fault I won't become an angel.
Well, we have a short clip called Spiritual Heredity that I was just watching today, actually, for some show research. But that it does go into a number that Swedenborg talks about just that whole dynamic that, like, what we do does... What other people, the generations before us, and then what we choose to do does have impact going down. Some sort of spiritual genetics is happening, both in terms of the baggage we give our children inevitably, in terms of evil tendencies, the worsened if we delighted in it and, did it from our own motivation, or then on the plus side, if we're doing some of the heavy lifting ourselves to turn ourselves, somehow that does good. But I've wondered about that, because, like, I don't know. You have kids young, and it's like it's too late. Like that, then you start regenerating after there.
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe there's nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
I think there definitely is, but that has impact.
Jonathan Rose, for all of you who are familiar, once said on this show, there's got to be some kind of patch updates or something, because you have kids, and then now I figured it out.
Yeah,
you can't just put that on hold. So hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think having kids young is so that they watch you in your process of becoming better and exposed to it that way.
At least I'm not as bad as.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it makes it's a weird analogy. I don't know if I should say
it. You're in good company.
If somebody donates $100.
Just that when people know that, like, a woman, like the eggs that a woman gets pregnant with were already in her body when she was conceived in her mom. Like, so it skips a generation there, in the woman. And so that seems like, well, I'm just the carrier, but this was created in my mom's womb. So there is some of that, like, so somehow there's a passage, jumping past generations that are like, I don't know. Somehow that just makes sense.
Wow.
Like that.
Interesting.
I'm confusing myself, but there's something going on there. Yeah.
Another thing to know is that Swedenborg says that we are all predestined. We're all created to become angels. And we can opt out of that program if we want to. But we were created to become angels. So that is just another piece to hold while you're considering whether it runs in families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like you could you may not be able to get that much of a head start. Well, he talks about people who have what he calls hereditary good, which is a tendency to be friendly, a tendency to be nice. But he seems to really poo-poo that, to say that does not make you go to heaven. What makes you go to heaven is putting aside the things that are harmful in yourself and doing good things because of acknowledgement of the divine being and all that. So I wouldn't say that the McGurdy's over there, they got it easy. Everyone's an angel in that way, I think, right? That's sort of the point.
Right. Yeah, that work still has to happen.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it. Let's I was gonna say let's get a few more in before the end, but we got it, and then the end is thousands of years away from now. Thank you, everyone.
Long time.
So let's take a look at the next question. What is the spiritual purpose of our memories here on Earth and beyond? Yeah, what do they do for us? And so let's talk about how we want to read this question. What's the spiritual purpose of our memories here on Earth, like the memories we accumulate on Earth? What's the purpose of them here, and then what's the purpose of those earthly memories in the future, in the next life? Or we could read it as, what's the purpose of your memory of stuff that's happening on Earth while you're on Earth, and your memory of stuff that's happening in the spiritual world? But is that a meaningful distinction? I don't know. Yeah. And if you want to weigh in, Jenny, about that. But what do you guys think? Why do we... memory can be a bit of a liability.
Yeah.
Because when it does work correctly, we can often remember disproportionately unpleasant things. And so what's it all for? And what's it do?
I remember coming across... it was fascinating to read that, Swedenborg talks about two memories. We have an internal memory and an external memory. And in the afterlife, kind of the internal memory, which is a recollection of, or a recording of everything. It's just like a tape recorder starts on day one and it's, keeps running through. But those memories are grouped by what he calls your ruling love. They kind of like begin to create structures around those memories based upon what you kind of like, the kind of character that you developed over time. And so it sounds like from that spirit, that is kind of like your spiritual memory in a sense. And that purpose is to really help you with your identity, because all those memories combine or are grouped by what you love, like what love drove everything for you, or, that was based on your intentions and all that stuff that are hard to figure out in the natural world. But it helps to create your identity.
Well, that's cool to think about the function of memory, and I don't know what it means, but Swedenborg talks about in spiritual world, when you think of a person, you call to mind everything in your memory about them, and it's sort of a collage. So even if you have something that was false about them, it matters what you're accumulating there. So that I have no moral lesson from that.
Yeah, like that serves a real purpose. I'm just being reminded of an interview we did with your grandma, Donnette,
Right.
Allfelt, about the value of her memories of her husband and feeling like that's real currency. Like that's a real thing that is maintaining this connection between her and her husband, that like that those are those the memories I have are this, real connection. And and beyond sort of like the identity, then I think another level of that is it then part of the purpose is then in where our ultimate like spiritual home is, like our community, like how heaven is arranged. I think like obviously it's going to help us know who we are, but then I just think it will help us fit into whatever community we are in heaven, because he describes spirits living in, there's like London or something. There's like places that look like the places on Earth, and it's because these people have enough, I think, shared memory. They know, and so you just think there are different communities that sort of have differences based on the collective memory of that community.
It's true. It's maybe not the weirdest thing we've said tonight, but it's pretty weird, the idea that the collective minds can recreate places on Earth in the other life. But it's true. He says it's there.
He says. Yeah.
And one role that Swedenborg seems to ascribe to memories is that it is the groundwork that needs to be laid for us to be able to understand anything, function rationally. So everything, all the words I'm saying, I learned at some point. I'm not necessarily recalling them to mind in the way I think of remembering things, but somehow I'm remembering what remembering means when I say remembering. And that all the stuff that we learn on Earth of how even things like how the planets move and how things grow, all of that is sort of these little containers into which we can then learn spiritual things, because the language of correspondences is such that it says, okay, well, how a plant grows, you've got that in your memory, right? Well, that's like how you develop spiritually.
Yeah.
Without the plant in our memory in a way we can grasp.
Yeah.
If they just try to say, you send forth things, and those turn into things, and we would never be able to retain it. But the stuff in the earthly memory plays that really sort of sacred role there.
That's awesome.
And then the other use is to just continue to annoy you when you're trying to move on with your life. Okay, thanks, Jan. If I didn't already say thank you for the donation. And let's take a look at the next one. This is Faye. Faye Davis, does anyone have any advice for what to do when we feel bitter or angry toward God and is making it near impossible to pray? I saw that one go by in the chat, and I was hoping that we would talk about it, because man, is it tough. Because as we were alluding to earlier, life is difficult, and it can be very hard when you're thinking about God having quite a lot of power in life, and yet life is as it is. What do you do? But yet we're in this situation where we're saying all the help, and a lot of times, who else do you reach out to? So how do you square that? I'd love to hear just from, if any of you have been in that situation before, what's it like? How have you navigated it?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that God gets it, and maybe you need a break. Like that's a human thing, and you just might need a little healing time before you can start to breathe again, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's like along what I was thinking of. In reflection for myself, is like understanding that we are always going through spiritual states, and there are going to be spiritual states that we pass through, and Swedenborg writes how the Lord alone is arranging our states, like taking very careful care, and knows that we're going to go through these dark times.
The valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah, and but that so when we're in one of those states, the Lord, sort of working behind the scenes, knows how to use even that state when we do feel bitter toward God and we don't want to pray, that can actually eventually serve us in the long run. But so for us in those moments is is like to not, hate ourselves for it and know that this state is going to pass. And so it's just like, I kind of feel like whatever I can do to just be present and just be like, this is what is. Okay, I'm just gonna, ride this out. That's sort of the best you can do, is just like be present to what it is.
Yeah, I love what you said about not letting it compound. Not only are we hurting to the point where we know we need something, but yet we're also upset at God and not wanting to reach out for that. You don't want to add to that. Am I a bad person for not wanting to reach out to God? Yeah. Swedenborg talks about temptations, which are also called spiritual trials, which are when life goes wrong, basically, and it shakes us down to a point where we really are in a state of distress. And he talks about people in those states say bitter things against the Lord, but no attention is paid, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely on that train where I feel like the more that I really believe there is God, the more I come up against this, just the feelings of like everything I've ever been through and my upset at that and things in the past. And so, I feel like, okay, that's going to go somewhere. And at times I used to be worried about feeling any kind of negativity towards God, like I shouldn't do it, and I could probably rein it in a bit, but I sort of, if I were God, I would hopefully see it as like, okay, well, they're really taking this seriously, this belief in life, and I just think of the pat on the back that you are giving me, like that's, if there's any time when, I don't want to pray to God, angel, will you help me out? Like, is there a person, or even go in it, like, what do you still find honorable and good and true about life? If I'm thinking of the idea of a God who runs something and didn't do what they needed to, and just this disembodied person in the sky, but what is beautiful, what is still good, and love that in the moment, and then when we have a chance to back up, realize like, no, that is God, and in some way that is God. That it's very difficult. It's not something that I'm past, but these are, you're saying, what's a little bits of advice. These are little tools that just help you get through the lean times.
And I think that like we think like, oh, I'm angry or bitter toward this sense of God, and that sort of externalizes God, but to think of even God as just love itself, and just this constant loving, supportive presence that like understands us. Like sometimes when you try on that perspective on yourself, like not only when you're in one of those hard, low states, the influence of evil spirits is wanting you to get down on yourself more about it, and so it can be so hard to resist against that sense to just like ride that wave real far down. But like to even have first you just have to pray, but like that state, I think it really helps to pray, to know, like knowing ahead of time, like I'm going to get in a negative state at some point, and I just hope for that moment to have that, like a moment of reflection to think about like a little bit separate from the state, and then but you have to let go of the outcome because you're really not in control. Like for you to have even the thought of maybe I could do something differently in this moment, that's like a gift from heaven, to even have that sort of a reflection. And but if you are in that state, I feel like it's to play with the idea of how could I be the most loving to myself right now? How can I show up for myself in a way that is like if the most understanding, loving friend I could imagine was right here next to me, or if somebody else was in this state, how would I treat them? And know that that's like the best way to like support yourself through it, And so it might be, oh, you just need to go lie down, or you need to whatever it is. But there's like to try to think, what would be the most loving way that I could show up for myself in this moment? And it's amazing how hard it is to even allow for that to be a possibility. We want to resist that so hard because it feels like, well, I should be doing this, or I should this, but to just like let go more. I think of intense times in physical states, like when people are drowning, like struggling makes it worse, and the more like the release is when you can like float in the water. I feel like I've heard stories from people who have been through that, and then I also think of like there is something true of like when you're being brought through something really intense, like a strong current, you've just got to hold on to one thing and ride it through. So like finding like one thing to sort of hold on to and just kind of ride that through. Some
great
thoughts.
Thank you.
I just saw going by too. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something?
Go ahead.
Faye saying that she's really in the valley right now and she feels a kind of spiritual immaturity. And I just want to say, Faye, you know, so I don't know how familiar with Swedenborg you are. At the end of his opus of writing in True Christianity, he talks a lot about repentance and reformation and like the responsibilities that we have in our own spiritual growth. But in the early Arcana, it's which is the first book he published, it's very much about how the Lord is absolutely in charge of your spiritual growth.
Yeah.
And he's got it. He's got it. He's got you in his hands. And so if you're spiritually immature, you're in the perfect place for you right now.
Yep.
and the Lord is just leading you along on your own unique path and toward your best possible eternal goodness. It is so hard to trust in that, but that's what Swedenborg says.
Yeah, that's great. And what seems to be confirmed by people's experiences all over the world, and it's just the more you sit with it, it's like, now this is the way that it's good and true. Do you guys feel that energy? Because we are in the bonus zone. Like we've crossed over into, because of, hey, thanks Julian1 for subscribing, really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. We are that talking we just did to Faye here, and hopefully you enjoyed it, was made possible by those of you who donated. And this is just a little microcosm, to use that word, that's my second time I can use it this show, of what the whole thing is, that all this programming is made possible because all of you have supported us so generously in the past. So this extra programming, because of support tonight, is just a little picture of how you all make this possible for everyone. Nice. And so let's not spend the whole time talking about support. Let's do the next question. What's the next question? Carrie Parsons, what's the Swedenborgian take on competitiveness? Who is going to answer this best? Go.
Chris? Not Chris.
No, if we're talking about competitiveness, it's got to start with Chris.
Oh, well, I'm going to win this one, I tell you.
Competitiveness.
So, yeah.
They play games. There's competition in heaven or in the spiritual world.
There's certainly an account of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what competitiveness is.
Oh, yeah.
And like anything, it is depending on the spirit behind it. So I know that Swedenborg talks about, and it's probably in jest, angels so enjoying to take somebody, it's either like guard somebody while they're asleep, I think it is, and they so love it that they vie with each other to be the one. You think about competition in order to find out who's most apt at a task, right? That could be, there could be some kind of heavenly instinct in that. If we really say, all right, we're going to all go out here and find out who's the best at this by this team. And Swedenborg talks about groups of angels. You know, each group will, in the wisdom games, will go out and try to say an answer to something, and the one who answers it the best does get something. But the difference is in hell, it's like, well, the people who win feel superior, the people who lose feel inferior, and the headline story is Group A was smarter than everyone. Yeah. In heaven, the people in the other groups are glad for the wisdom. The people in the group who won know it just comes from
everybody
God.
Benefits.
And the headline is, now we have this great answer that we can apply to serve the human race. Mm-hmm. So you know, it's what depending on, people probably mean different things by that word, but there's aspects of it that could be heavenly, and certainly aspects of it that are hellish, because it's based on this illusion that, you know, I can be better than anybody. It's providence and everything we've been talking about. So
yeah, Swedenborg definitely is like, he'll often, and I don't know, I guess maybe if it was sort of going against sort of the times of, you know, the whole idea of like, oh, if you're going to be holy, you have to sell everything and go live in a cave and be by yourself. He's like, no, live in the world, you know, do your thing. That's how you grow spiritually, because of what you're saying, that like the inner motivation is what really matters there. And so then he makes the same point about wealth, you know, like, oh, I should not have any money, but he's like, no, you can be good. You can be a good steward of wealth and use it to benefit people. And so it's good, you know, go try to raise a bunch of money and do good things with it. And so I think that kind of falls into the same category of competitiveness where, right, he does sort of of all the things he experienced, he does write these memorable relations, as he calls them, of his experiences of people looking like they're just competing with each other, but it's for good, like you're describing. So
yeah, I think you can get glimpses of that here too. I mean, if you play sports, you might notice times in which, if you're saying, I played a lot of baseball, and if the conditions are right, where the kind of like the spirit of competitiveness is based on like your team learning about fairness and respect, and whether you win or lose, always like treating your enemy or your opponents as mutual neighbors. There's like rituals that you would do after games to like make sure that you look at them in the eyes and shake their hands and wish them well. Or is that your competitiveness based on domination and making sure that your reputation is seen as top level? I think it really comes down to like what's driving the reason for why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Think about off the left eye. Like we are, you might think of this as non-competitive, but we are a competing ideology that we put out into the world, and we'll often directly take on what we feel like is a selfish or harmful way to act, and we'll say, look at these ideas instead, and we put a lot of effort in it. Look at these ideas, and hopefully what we're doing there is where we're trying to make it in the spirit of heavenly competitiveness, because not because the more that we succeed, the better it is for us, but the more the ideas get out there, we genuinely believe this is going to do what's good for the human race. So why wouldn't we go as hard as we possibly can to put these into the right format and get the right stuff behind them? So
yeah, there's something about contrast in a competition. There's a contrast between those are ahead and those are behind, and contrast can be extremely useful, like you just said. There's a passage in Swedenborg that talks about that in heaven children learn, like they are shown little hints of evil so that they can see the contrast. The opposite of it is good. And I don't know why this is coming to mind. That's what's coming to mind when I'm talking about competitiveness. It's just seeing contrast, and it helps. It can help pull you forward again.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And we talked about sort of how Swedenborg always has a foot in both camps, and we've talked here about there can be heavenly aspects to competitiveness. On the flip side, heaven is 1,000,000% cooperative. There's no competition between different parts of the human body for resources or anything. This is absolutely what's best for everyone. And actually, I think we're going to reference this in an upcoming show. Swedenborg talks about societies of friendship, where the problem with a group of people is they're all very nice to each other, but they hold in their heart, like, we're the best people. The people outside our community really don't have it going on like we do. And that actually is so toxic that it makes it hard for them to participate in heaven, because heaven is actually, even if you're really good at something, you want the next person's happiness more than you even want your own, which is the absolute anti-competitiveness.
Right.
So it could
Good point.
it's almost like the wisdom could be competitive. Like we're trying to get the best thing done, but the motive is beyond cooperative.
Yeah,
for sure. Not
Okay.
at all resistant.
Yeah,
Swedenborg says.
let's just do one more. The people have spoken. Let's get a quick one in there before we're hitting our 15-minute extra. So this is Charlie V, Lakers for Life. Is it true that if you commit suicide, the mere event repeats itself eternally, that you never rest?
Wow.
So that would be really unfortunate, right? Especially since so many people that commit suicide are not in a fit mental state. A lot of them are young. A lot of them are devastated by various things. So that would seem very cruel. And so does it happen? Does Swedenborg say anything about that?
Well, it's certainly something we see a lot in the comments section. I mean, I've been moderating YouTube for maybe 3 or 4 years, and this question comes up, and there's a whole lot of pain and angst about how I think other groups have held this kind of question and used that to judge others. But the reality is, no single act is going to give you some kind of like eternity from it.
Yeah.
And the decision, it's an incredibly painful one for everyone involved. But the pain that drives that decision is something that I think someone's going to have to confront in the afterlife. And there are remarkable systems in place for someone to be guided through that in a loving presence with angels, with the Lord guiding the entire thing. So I think it's you face it. You can't escape that kind of pain, but you're not damned eternally for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what would that teach? That nothing harmful can happen unless some good is brought out of it. For something to repeat and repeat and repeat without hope for learning or something, it's the antithesis of how God runs the universe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? Okay, so Swedenborg, having a foot in both camps. Again, he does talk about, he very, very rarely mentions suicide. Definitely says that a single act cannot define who you are. It doesn't matter. Suicide, even murder. It all depends on what your intent was and what your lifetime of intent has been. So there's no way that something like a suicide can decide your eternal fate. And you get cleared up for it. And here he talks about evil spirits driving people to commit suicide. So the origin of it wasn't even them. On the other hand, he talks about somebody in the afterlife who is having trouble getting a knife out of their hand. It is someone who had killed themselves. But it's not forever. And I will say that, I've known people who have committed suicide, and it does so much damage to so many people. And it wouldn't be necessarily good for them to just never understand what it was or sort through it. So it's a little bit of both, but definitely not what Charlie's worrying about there. That it's repeating for eternity, that's not for any good, and that's not what God is. That's not what it's about. Okay, cool. Everybody, thank you so much. That was awesome. You did it. We did our extra bonus.
Total raise.
Hey, 182 from 8 donors. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, and we're going to put that right into trying to reach the next person with everything. And to prove it, here's some of what's coming up in the next week. We have next we're going to do News from Heavens, which is our show where we go through a particular passage in Swedenborg's writings. And let me just get this thing here. Can you guys cover for me for a second?
Are you wondering what's next week?
Okay, here we go. So, because I have a little thing that was going to show me, but it froze, so I fixed it. So Thursday, the persistence of evil spirits in bringing evil on people. That's News from Heaven on Thursday. And Saturday, how not to kill, parentheses, don't be like the devil. So this is how the devil kills, and we don't want to kill in that same way. Then we have our short clips, which are coming up Wednesday. We have a short clip about the idea that perfection stems from variety and how that works. And then on Friday, does the Bible say that there are 3 gods or 1 God? And we talked about Holy Spirit today. Can we square what Swedenborg says with Bible? Then next Monday, we are going to be continuing our Swedenborgian Life series with Will Life Be Different When You Die? Which you can kind of see that behind Cara and Chris's heads there. There it is. So this may be the very one Chelsea and I were referencing earlier. And then the following Monday, we'll be going at Swedenborgian Life Live, talking about the difference between grace and, it says mercy behind Chris's shoulder there. So that is the upcoming slate. Thank you for your support that's making it possible. And thank you to the panel.
Yes.
Really enjoyed getting to talk with you. Thanks to the audience. It was great having you down here. And we'll see you again next time. And we'll see you in all those other shows. And we'll see you all the time. Sorry, we're going to be here no matter what.
Take care of us. Not yet.
Bye.